Chapter 30, Air Brake Foundation Systems and Air Brake Circuits, Day 3, Video 3, Hold Off Circuit. Okay, so when we're talking about the hold off circuit, that is the park emergency brake circuit. We have to hold off or cage or compress that spring to release the park brake, right? So with no air in the system, the truck has been parked overnight, all the air pressure bleeds off, right? The park brake spring has expanded, right? So when we set the park brake, that spring has expanded, it's applied the brakes, and it's holding the spring pressure is holding the brakes applied, right? So we call that, with no air, that is our hold off system. We have to have air to release the park brake, right? So when the air pressure is 0, nothing acting on the hold off diaphragms of the truck, springs are applied, the springs are expanded, the park brakes or the surface brakes are applied. So coming back here to this cutaway, right? So this is our hold off circuit. On our surface brake side, I said it was very important that we realize that we add air pressure to apply the surface brakes, right? The moving the brake pedal down 5 or 10 pounds comes in and presses this piston down, applies the surface brakes. On the park emergency brake, we add air into it. So in this case right here, I've got this whole chamber here is full of pressurized air acting on the surface of this piston to compress the spring, right? So if there was no air pressure in here, this spring would expand, pushing this piston down, relay piston coming down, applying the surface brakes, right? So we need air pressure to hold off or to release the park brake. I'm driving down the road 60 miles an hour. I should have this volume of air here would be full of pressurized air to compress the springs and releases the brakes, right? So we have to add air to release the park brake. That spring that's contained in that brake chamber is equal to 1,700 or 1,725 pounds of force contained in that spring. We compress that spring, right? It's pushing out with 1,700 pounds of force, trying to expand back out and apply those brakes. So that's why we need system air pressure in there to compress that spring. So on a 30 square inch chamber, it takes about 60 psi to be able to overcome that 1,700 pounds of force and compress that spring. So in a minimum, to move the truck, we would need 60 pounds of pressure to act on the hold-off circuit and compress that park brake spring. That's why in the brake system, we have a buzzer and an alarm light that goes off and alerts the driver that we are at 60 pounds of pressure. That's either letting him know that we have enough pressure in the system to compress the spring brakes and move the truck, or if he's driving down the road and we have a loss of air pressure in the system, once it gets down to 60 psi, the light comes on, the buzzer comes on, allows that driver to realize that the spring brakes are just about to start to begin to apply. Safety factor in here, right? That 1,700 pounds of force is contained in that brake chamber. Extremely dangerous to work around. Spring force is this: if we take that apart without knowing what we're doing, that spring can then be released and hurt or potentially kill whoever's working on it. And we'll have a lab that will talk about disarming the brake chamber.